Shabbat Shalom, everybody. If you were to open up a 2025 guidebook to Budapest, after the baths and after the Buda Castle, one of the first recommendations would be to check out the city's ruin bars. Built inside dilapidated Soviet buildings, abandoned factories, or apartment complexes, often covered with graffiti on the walls and sometimes missing a roof or something else essential, these bars have become the cornerstone of Budapest's nightlife. Ruin bars are largely located in the heart of the 7th district on the Pest side of the river, in what used to be the thriving Jewish quarter in a city that was once derided by anti-Semites as Judapest. They draw tourists from across Europe, and even a few Hungarians, brought there by the unique charm of over-the-top facades mixed with the beautiful diviness of something crumbling but transformed before your eyes. Even the poshest new restaurant in Budapest, called Mazel Tov, is itself categorized as a ruin bar, falling apart, missing a roof over part of it, but with the swanky ambiance and food that makes you feel like you're on Dizengoff Street in Tel Aviv. But no guidebook could have imagined or predicted what happened at one of those ruin bars last Wednesday night. Nearly every single one of the 30 Temple Emanu-El folks that were in Budapest last week migrated from our dinner to a ruin bar turned nightclub called Instant Fogash alongside a gaggle of Hungarian Jews. We went with employees from the thriving Budapest JCC, the center of Jewish life in Hungary, leaders of the Budapest Moishe House for people in their 20s, and madrichim from Sarvash Camp, the largest Jewish summer camp in Europe, just a 2-hour drive from the heart of Budapest. And there, with the residue of the Iron Curtain still inside each of us, West met East. American and Hungarian Jews gathered together to tell our stories and to dance, all inside the walls of what had been, not that long ago, a thriving Jewish quarter, and not that long ago, the Jewish ghetto, the place where hundreds of thousands of Jews had been gathered before being deported to Auschwitz in the span of just a few months at the very end of the war. We will dance again, literally amidst the ruins of our people. It was there that one of the young women who worked at the Budapest JCC, still slightly confused as to why a rabbi would be in a nightclub on a Wednesday night, told me her story as to how she became a Hungarian Jewish professional. And then, with the club music blaring in the background, she turned and asked me, "So, who's your favorite character from the Torah?" Now, I gave her an answer, but the real answer was all around us. The real answer was in the people we met on our week-long trip inside Jewish Budapest in partnership with JDC's Entwine. Because just as the Torah was, as the scholar Judith Shulevitz says, the product of the impulse to preserve memories and knowledge all but lost in calamity, lest the dispersed Jews forget who they'd been, this Jewish community in Budapest is preserving memories and knowledge of what had been lost in calamity. And like Ezra and the cast of characters who helped bring the Torah to life as the Jewish people sought to rebuild in the land of Israel in the ruins of the first temple, the characters in our ruin bar were preserving memory as part of reminding the Jews that they are Jews and reminding Budapest that Jews are still there. Like the ruin bars we were in, they understood the structure was there, but that it took effort to transform it into something beautiful. Some of the characters we met along the way included Marcel, the director of the Budapest JCC, who lit Shabbat candles here not that long ago. And like many Jews in Hungary, Marcel only discovered that he was Jewish as a teenager. Many Hungarian Jews, like his family, hid their Jewishness from their children, fearing that either another Holocaust would happen or that the Soviet-aligned state would find out and punish them for being Jews. Upon the collapse of the Soviet Union, however, his parents enrolled him at the brand new Jewish day school that opened up, called the Louder School. But it took a few months before Marcel started asking some questions and discovered that indeed he was Jewish. Now the leader of the JCC, he is part of the glue that holds together the center of Jewish life in Hungary. The Budapest JCC is not a synagogue, but it is a Beit Knesset. It's a house of gathering and welcomes thousands of Hungary's over 100,000 Jews each year. They don't care about halachic status. They're not like Chabad turning you away unless your mother's mother was Jewish. But if you have a connection to the story of the Jewish people, if your family was subject to the Holocaust, and if you're ready to re-engage with Jewish life, at that Beit Knesset, at that house of gathering, you have a home. Alongside Marcel, we met Anna, whose father was a rabbi in a small town in the countryside, and who came to the Budapest JCC to help build, and these were her words, a culture of philanthropy among Hungarians. For 3 decades, the fledgling Hungarian Jewish community, like every other Jewish community in Eastern Europe, has been wholly dependent on restitution from the German government and aid from American Jews, including from this Dallas Jewish community, which has had a tremendous impact on Hungary's Jews. But feeling more and more ready to establish some independence, more and more confident in their growing Jewish community in Hungary, Anna is helping Hungarians recognize that they need to contribute in order to make their Judaism happen. She worked with the Hungarian government to allow Hungarian Jews to check a box on their taxes to donate 1% of their taxes to the JCC, which is their version of a charitable tax deduction. And she's helping people see that to be a strong and independent Jewish community, it needs to be self-sustaining, which means that Hungary's Jews need to learn how to chip in, even with what little they have. We went to the Louder School, where Marcel had studied way back when, and met a group of characters that could have popped out of the Sunday school here at Temple Emanu-El. 9th graders showed us around the largest of 3 Jewish day schools in Budapest, where over 900 Jewish students attend K through 12. On our tour, we got to ask the 9th graders questions about their lives at school. We got to see boys being annoying to girls and their understanding of being Jewish. We got to see the bright spots of Hungary's Jewish future. One girl in my group was on a sailing team. She was probably the only person on her team with a connection to Judaism. The other went to Sarvas camp and talked about what it was like to wear a Magen David in public on a bus in Budapest. Their impeccable English, like so many around the world, came from hours of watching Friends. We also got the chance to meet Misha, a madrich from Sarvas camp, and saw firsthand how Europe's largest Jewish summer camp has transformed people's understanding of what it means to be Jewish. Also opened in the early 1990s, Sarvas has redefined what people think of when they hear the word Jews and camp in Europe. Instead of suffering and genocide, Sarvas is a multi-ethnic, multicultural, green family camp, drawing Jews from France to Russia to India and everywhere in between. Built on the American model, this summer camp has inspired a deep sense of Jewish connection for Europe's Jews. They just have to make their announcements in 6 languages in order to give their young Jews a space to be with each other in a world which, much like ours, these young Jews are often the only ones in their schools. And we had a chance to be a part of the story ourselves. On Thursday morning, after our late night in the ruined bars of Budapest, our American group woke up to the horrific news of 2 people being shot and killed at point-blank range outside of an AJC event in Washington, D.C. As more information started coming in and we learned the identities of Yaron and Sarah Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be for a blessing, our group grappled with the shocking uncertainty of another moment of feeling our safety shattered, this time, though, from half a world away. Unfortunately, across much of Europe right now, being openly Jewish isn't a recipe for safety. I stopped in Amsterdam on my way to Budapest and would not have felt safe wearing a kippah or a Star of David necklace there. Entering Jewish spaces in Europe means going through way more security and precaution. Jewish memorials to the dead are as present as the signs telling Jews not to come back. Budapest felt different, but our locals acknowledged the complexity of the situation. The government of Viktor Orban, which was initially very unfriendly to Jews and blamed all of their problems on outside nefarious forces like George Soros, has actually warmed up to the Jewish community. They see Jews as part of the good guys in their war against migrants, largely coming from Muslim countries. That, for now, government support gives local Jews a tepid sense of safety. But in the back of every Jewish mind is the question of when it might turn on us. And in the meantime, the community stands up as Orban tries to rewrite history and make it seem like the Nazis came in and demanded that Hungary give up its Jews rather than embracing the truth that Hungary's leadership happily handed over their Jews, particularly from the countryside, watching their demise just north in the extermination camps of Poland. In our Torah portion this week, Parshat Bamidbar, we begin the book of Numbers, and our ancestors began an ambitious project, building a people out of seemingly nothing after living under oppression for centuries in Egypt. They didn't enter the promised land immediately. It took 2 generations of wandering in the desert before they could create a solid and stable Jewish life that could then thrive in the land of Israel. In Hebrew, we call the book of Torah that we're starting this week Bamidbar, literally meaning in the desert, a name that allows the reader to focus on the calamities of living in the desert for 40 years, the struggles, the kvetching, wondering if things might have been better off back in Egypt. Is it even all worth it to be Jewish? But in English, we call this book Numbers, a name acknowledging that the book begins and ends with a census. The Torah painstakingly counts each family, their number and their connection back to certain families, all going back to the 12 sons of Jacob, and then Jacob himself, and then Isaac, and then Abraham. The census is an acknowledgement that building Jewish life starts with preserving memory and knowledge that might have been lost in a calamity, so that Jews can finally remember who they are as they seek to build the next iteration of Jewish life. Which brings me to our final character from our story in Budapest, our guide, Kares. Kares would point out anything and everything that had any connection to any Hungarian Jew or any Hungarian with slight bits of Jewish descent. This building over there, built by a Hungarian Jew. That bridge over there, built by a Hungarian Jew. Bruno Mars, Hungarian Jew. Paul Simon, Hungarian Jew. Theodore Herzl, Hungarian Jew. And on and on and on. It almost became laughable by the end of the trip, and to be honest, some of us made side bets on how many times he would say something or connect something to a Hungarian Jew on each tour. But just as the Israelites started their wandering in the desert with a census, in which each family could draw some connection to an ancient and almost mythical family that most had probably forgotten they were a part of to begin with, so too, the Jews of Hungary, like Kares, need to first draw a connection to their past in order to build their future. That's what happens when you have a generation wiped out by fascism and then squashed for 50 years by the Soviet Union. But in Hungary, more than almost anywhere else in Europe, it is happening, and Jewish life today is directly connected to their past. Europe's largest synagogue, the Dohan Synagogue in Budapest, might not be full, but the community is authentically and genuinely building themselves up and making the city feel like Judapest once again. And one final point on Kares. The man loves Passover. He told us on a few occasions how much he loves hosting his Seder. And one of the very first things he told us on our trip was that on Passover in Hungary, we don't say, and you should tell your children. Instead, we say, you shall tell your parents. For 2 generations, the parents were not able to tell the children, and so the story started to go away. But in an extraordinary and special set of circumstances, facilitated in large part by support from this American Jewish community, suddenly the Jews have come out of the woodwork to create the institutions and rebuild genuine and authentic Hungarian Jewish life. And so the first step of this generation is to learn their past, to name all the great things the Hungarian Jews once did, to figure out the stories and then teach them to their parents, to acknowledge the ruins and figure out what they once were before transforming themselves into something new. Like countless Jewish communities before, they are emerging from the ruins, writing the story of the next chapter of the Jewish people. Shabbat